Hi, my name's Nick.
Hi, I'm Cassie.
Hi, I'm Elena. Hi, I'm Julia.
Our skill under investigation is skipping. The goal of skipping can be for various reasons. In David Gallagher's and all 7th edition book, Understanding Motor Development, Infants, Children, Adolescents, Adults says, like galloping and sliding, skipping is used in many folk and cultural dances around the world. Skipping can also be used functionally by teachers to promote cardiovascular endurance in warm-up games and dance. One can simply use skipping to get from one location to another or to exercise. It is important for improving coordination and strengthening the muscles in your arms and legs.
In the book Developing Children, Their Changing Movement, A Guide for Teachers, by Robertson Haversham, with the aid of Mary Ann Robertson's article, Testing the Validity of the Haversham Developmental Sequence for Skipping, she breaks down the sequence into a leg action component and an arm action component, with each having 3 stages. In the leg action component of stage 1, a one-footed skip happens, where one foot completes a step and a hop before the weight is transferred to the other foot. The other foot just steps. In stage 2, a two-footed skip with a flat-footed landing. Each foot completes a step and a hop before the weight is transferred to the other foot. Landing from the hop is on the total foot, or on the ball of the foot, with the heel touching down before the weight is transferred, a flat-footed landing. In stage 3, a two-footed skip. Landing from the hop is on the ball of the foot. The heel does not touch down before the weight is transferred to the other foot. Body leaning increases over the things found in stage 2. In the arm action component of stage 1, a bilateral assist. The arms pump bilaterally up as the weight is shifted from the hopping to the stepping foot and down during the hop, takeoff, and flight. In stage 2, semi-opposition, where the arms first swing up bilaterally. During the hop on the right foot, the right arm moves down and back only slightly while the left arm continues to move forward until the step on the left foot. Then, both arms again move forward and upward in a new bilateral pumping action. Now, however, the left arm moves back only slightly, while the right arm moves back until the step on the right foot. Although the arm action has beginnings of opposition, at some point in the arm cycle, both hands are in front of the body. In stage 3, opposition, where the arm opposite the stepping leg swings upward and forward in synchrony with that leg that reverses direction when the stepping leg touches the floor. The arm on the same side as the stepping leg moves backward and down in the opposition to the stepping leg. At no time are both hands in front of the body.
In this video, this 3-year-old is showing a developmental stage 1. Her arms are moving in the anterior part of her body for the majority of the skipping exercise. She tends to move arms horizontally across the body with the opposite arm of the lifted leg. She does show a pattern of oppositional arm and leg movement during the skipping activity. The arms do not provide movement pattern that is effective in providing momentum. In the vertical lift of her legs, she exaggerates each step during the transfer of weight from one leg to the other. She tends to move knees inward as she skips forward and lands with feet flat on the ground. In respect to Bernstein's ideas of coordination, she is showing periodic freezing of joints in the upper limbs. She is limiting range of motion to movement in the anterior portion of the body, and this allows her more control over her lower body's knee and hip flexion. The freeing of joints is apparent in the lower portion of the body. In respect to Newell's model of constraints, the task for this 3-year-old is to get from point A to point B in the skipping exercise. The environmental constraint is the paved ground had uneven surfaces. Sociocultural constraints include her experience, which is physical activity such as running, hiking, playground activity, kicking a ball, and biking. She has very little experience skipping and only has done this a few times. She also needed encouragement from her parents to complete this exercise. According to Haywood and Getchell, skipping is usually the last locomotor skill to emerge, usually between the ages of 4 and 7. A little more than half of 5-year-olds demonstrate skipping. This could reflect why this 3-year-old could not complete skipping effectively. According to Haywood and Getchell, girls typically perform these motor skills earlier than boys. This individual structural constraints include her small stride length, shorter leg, and arm length. Her functional constraints is that she was not motivated to skip. She tends to be more motivated with familiar activity. In my skipping video, I am showing a skill level of a developmental stage 2. I skip using the oppositional arms and legs. I'm also using my arms to build momentum to provide forward upward momentum. In respect to Bernstein's ideas of coordination, I'm using both upper and lower body. Freezing of joints is not required because skipping has been learned. All variable joints are freeing to complete the skipping exercise.
In this video, we can see the 12-year-old is stiffly moving her arms to aid in balance throughout the skipping movement. The 12-year-old is in developmental stage 2. Her arms remain swinging in front of her hips and rarely swing behind the hips. In this video, we can also see the 12-year-old is using the vertical swing of her legs to keep the momentum of the skip. According to Marianne Robertson's study, testing the validity of the Halverson developmental sequence for skipping, the balancing movement of the arms was the most dominant during this stage of the skip, which explains the stiffness in the 12-year-old's arm while performing. With the arms being restricted in movement to aid in balance, the 12-year-old, according to Bernstein's model, is exhibiting control through freezing degrees of freedom. The arms are being limited to flex only at the shoulder joint. The movement of the 12-year-old's legs also exhibits control through freezing because of the way both the knee joint and the hip joint are only flexing and extending. There is no other movement required. The task of the 12-year-old is to get from one end of the driveway to the other. Some constraints that may influence her skipping is the surface of the driveway. There are some cracks, as we can see on the ground, and uneven pavement. She also does not skip on a regular basis and does not participate in physical activity. The length of her legs may also influence the momentum of her performance. Next, in my video of myself skipping, we can see the minimal use of my arms. They remained on the sides of my body and swung more naturally, placing myself in developmental stage 3. Throughout my skipping, my heels remained in an upright position and I gained very little momentum from the vertical swing of my legs. Based on Bernstein's model, I exhibit control through freezing degrees of freedom because of the isolated movements of the arms and the very little releasing movements of the legs.
An 18-year-old skipping. We can see that the 18-year-old loosely swings his arms while skipping and that he is in stage 2. His arms and legs remain vertical while skipping and did not necessarily go back as he was skipping. In Bernstein's interpretation, we can see that he is freezing with degrees of freedom. The lower body remains flexing and extending throughout the time he was skipping. There is minimal usage of the upper body. The 18-year-old's goal is to get from point A to point B, and some constraints include his lack of motivation to skip, lack of usage of the skipping skill, and physical inactivity. As stated in Alan Burden, Luis Garcia, and Clarissa Garcia's article, Skipping and Hopping of Undergraduates' Recollection of Why and When, states that although adolescents cannot recall the last time that they have hopped or skipped, they are still able to recall the reasons for skipping and be able to perform the skill. In my video of skipping, we can see that I am also in stage 2. The first video shows more of my arms swaying to aid in momentum and that my arms remain side by side vertically. The second video shows minimal usage of my arms but remained to sway. There was no need for full usage of range of motion as the skill was already learned. In Bernstein's idea, the shoulder, hip, and knee joints remained flexing and extending in a consistent manner. The legs remain close to the ground while performing the skips, and there are freezing degrees of freedom.
In video 1 of the older adult, it shows that he is in the first developmental stage of skipping because there is less effectiveness in the use of the arms to provide any kind of momentum. It is also apparent that a step hop is being deliberately utilized, shown as an exaggerated step during the transfer of weight from one supporting limb to the other, making the movement look segmented and more of a marching movement. In video 2, stage 1 of skipping still applies due to the reasons stated previously, but starts to show signs of stage 2 development as the subject begins to move his arms to generate a more fluid upward momentum, exaggerating a vertical component of the hop during the airborne stage. In relation to Bernstein's idea of coordination, in video 1, he shows early learning markers, because there is a freezing constraint in his joints in an attempt to simplify the skipping pattern, making his movement inefficient, although there is a high degree of freedom in the range of motion of his lower joints and shoulder joints. In video 2, the freezing of the arms happens at the beginning by not utilizing the full range of motion, then later displays releasing of the arms towards the end of the exercise, indicating mid-learning markers. Freezing is also shown in the lower extremities as the knee and hip joints show consistent angles of degrees of freedom. In pertinence to Newell's constraint model, some of the task goal constraints are the goal is to get from point A to point B. Some of the task equipment constraints was needing an additional instructional YouTube video on learning how to skip. The environmental external layout constraint was a paved ground with no uneven surfaces. The environmental social culture constraint was being previously experienced in physical activity, particularly soccer, but has not been participating for a number of years. Another social culture constraint was that there was a want to be an entertaining subject by trying to use humor whilst filming the video.
You're a jerk, I know. You're a jerk, I know. You're a jerk, I know. You're a jerk, you're a jerk, I know. You're a jerk, I know. You're a
An individual structural constraint was that he has an injured left knee and actually needs a knee brace to perform the movement. The individual functional constraint was claiming not knowing how to skip and was reluctant to participate initially, which may be a result when I informed my dad, "Hey, I need you to skip like a little schoolgirl for me."
jerk, 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 jerk.
In David Galloway's et al.'s 7th edition book, Understanding Motor Development in Infants, Children, Adolescents, and Adults, states that Sparduso and McRae point out the variability in the motor performance of adults increases with each decade of life. The descriptions of average behavior for specific age groups grow less and less accurate for an individual's performance as the age of the group increases. Galloway et al. Also mentioned that in the motor domain, physiological changes play a crucial role in the performance of a motor task. Older adults usually experience declines in muscular strength, vision, and other systems. This then can explain why it seems as if the older adult digresses to the first developmental stages of skipping in comparison to the 6 to 12 and 12 to 18-year-olds. In my video of skipping, I fall within stage 2 because of the utilization of the arms to aid with forward momentum and the rhythmical transfer of weight between each step, using extremities to generate forward momentum in an oppositional manner. In relation to Bernstein's idea of coordination, my skipping falls in the later learning phase because of the consistent degrees of freedom in the arms and leg joints. The movement itself is redundant, making it freeing.
Between each group member, Cassie was considered the best skipper and Julia was considered the worst. We came to this conclusion because in comparing the two skipping, we can see that Cassie uses the movement of both her arms and legs more. Cassie has an increased use of her arms, providing forward and upward momentum, whereas Julia has a reduced arm action, keeping her arms more straight and closer to her body. Cassie is also bringing the swing of her legs up and higher, while Julia's legs remain closer to the ground and swing in a more straightforward position.
Together as a group, we found other sources to help better explain the characteristics and the development of skipping across a lifespan. From our findings, we can conclude that the skill of skipping is the last locomotor motor skill to be developed for a child after learning how to walk, run, and gallop. After the skill has been acquired and mastered, it is suggested that in between phases from when the skill is learned to middle adulthood, there can be significant variability due to people's constraints. Thus, the skipping skill slowly digresses as we reach older adulthood.
Jerk, I know. You're a jerk, you're a jerk.